There we are. Greetings. How's everybody? This is June 1st, 2022. And this is a research night. So anybody and their brother is here, and it'll be up on the YouTube channel eventually. And glad to have you all here. I'm excited about tonight. This is the part two, greetings. Part two of the Wild Wild East Studies in Judges, the book of Judges. And 2 weeks ago, I didn't know exactly why I wanted to teach this, but it's become evident to me that it needed to be taught to me and now you. I call it the series because there'll be more than part two. We'll only get through chapter 5 tonight of Judges. The prophetess Deborah will be the finality of tonight's session. But it's between theocracy, meaning the rule of God, and kingship, meaning the rule of man or David in specifics. So we're Moses kind of hands off his theocratic kingdom, and we're in Never Never Land with the book of Judges. So the Wild Wild East series delves into the period between Moses and David. So we got a little bit of the end of Moses. We'll have some Balaam thrown in there eventually, because Balaam, of course, harkens back to the Exodus and going through the land of Moab and Midian. And then a little bit of Joshua. We even had a little bit in part 1 and Caleb, and then of course the Judges, because then at the end of Judges you have the first quote unquote you have the last judge, which I think a lot of people consider Samuel as the last judge, and then that'll end the series, but there's a lot of material, so it'll be great. So a time and period in the history of Israel coming when they came to occupy the promised land. And I have a little quiz for you. Don't look at the bottom of the screen. Where is the one place in Scripture where the promised land is said to be the promised land? And the answer is Hebrews 11:8. That's the only place I could find. Some of you else find it. I'd appreciate it. But I Googled in my Bible Works program the promised land, and then the only one that came up with the two terms, land and promise, was Hebrews 11:8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he went to live in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, living in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs with him of the same promise. So in that land of promise, when Moses hands off leadership to Joshua, he dies on Mount Nebo, and the angels argue about it. If you've read the book of Peter, Michael argues with the devil about something about Moses's burial place. Anyway, which is a weird thing, right? The leadership of the nation of Israel was disjunctive. That's about the best thing you could say about it. The Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites were all there. And the question is, was it their land? No, it was promised to God's nation, Israel. So the review of part 1, as we get into part 2, has to do with God's rule, and it's tied up into this land, which is part of the Abrahamic covenant. That was part of what God promised and was in a covenant relationship with Abraham about, the people and the land, okay? And then the God being king is the Davidic covenant. And neither of those two, regardless of what you hear in theology, have transpired, come to pass, are fulfilled, however you want to say it. So that the old covenant, of which Abraham and David's are a part, are not yet fulfilled. So how can you have a new covenant in effect? It isn't. And it isn't yet because it was promised to Israel. And you remember that even in the gospel period, Jesus prayed, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." So God's kingdom is still yet in heaven. And Jesus needs to get God's kingdom. and it becomes Jesus's kingdom. That's literally what happens. And then God sends him back to earth, and then he does his deeds, rules for years and years, and then hands that kingdom back to God. Anyway, so last time we reviewed Moses and the spies, that showed how the two spies, all but two, discouraged the children of Israel going to Canaan. And so God told them, okay, you're going to walk around for a little while, and then we're going to bring only a few people in to the promised land. So that's the 40 years of the wandering in the wilderness. Then we talked about God's promised protection. The angel of the Lord, we'll see a little bit about the angel of the Lord. We did in part 1, showed how the angel of the Lord went ahead and behind the people of Israel as they crossed the Red Sea, came up the right side of the land of Midian and up through Moab, Ammon, Basra. Basra is the town right next to me, and I live in Salem, which is peace right here in Connecticut. And then we reviewed Joshua's records of the defeat of Og and Sihon, who were kings, Amoritic kings, Amorites, and they lived up near Mount Hermon in northeast Palestine, and they were Rephaim. And then the last thing we did was Joshua and Caleb in the Judges, and the first judge we handled with rare, it was really quick, and we're going to review it really quick a little tonight, was how Othniel, Caleb's younger brother, was the first judge. So on we go. So the angel of the Lord, a big deal with the land. The angel of the Lord did indeed go up with Moses and Joshua and claim the promised land. Then he shows up in the book of Joshua. No, actually doesn't show up in the book of Joshua, shows up in the book of Judges. And at the end of the time period of the Exodus, last time you see the angel of the Lord before you see him in Judges is in the Numbers chapter 22 with Balaam. Chapter 22 is the only place, but Balaam's history is in chapter 22 through 24 of Numbers. Anyway, angel of the Lord appears in Judges 2, bringing news no one wanted to hear. And this is how we kick off tonight. The angel of Yahweh, I don't know what translation this is to have the word Yahweh rather than the capital L-O-R-D there, went up from Gilgal to Bochum and said, I brought you up from Egypt, and I brought you to the land that I had promised your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and as for you, do not make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land or break down their altars, please. But you did not listen to my voice. Why would you do such a thing? That's a very good question. I'd almost put parentheses, you idiots, but I didn't. So now I say, I will not drive them out from before you. They will become as thorns for you, and their gods will be a trap for you. And as the angel of Yahweh spoke these words, all the Israelites, the people, wept bitterly. And this is kind of the introduction tonight because, the angel of Yahweh, he wasn't the one that brought them out of Egypt. He was the, what would you call it? If God's the author, he's the agent or something, right? He was able to come down because God doesn't come down. Do I show that? Yeah, maybe I do. He came down and protected them, but it was really God, Yahweh, who did the prophetic deal. So Judges 2:11, then the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. There, we're back to the L-O-R-D there instead of Yahweh. So we know it's not the New American Standard. And they served the Baals, not just one, but the plural Baals. And they forsook the Lord, and the God of their father, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt, followed other gods. That's the Hebrew Elohim, from among the gods of the people. Again, Elohim in both of those places, of the peoples who were around them, and they bowed themselves down to them. Thus they provoked the Lord to anger. Yeah, duh. So they forsook the Lord and served Baal and the Ashtaroth. That's the Ashtaroth is the little penises that they carved for themselves and stuck them up on the top of little mountains because that's where you went to talk to God. You made your little Ashtaroth, which is a penis, folks. That's what they did. They worshiped gods, and most of the time it was a little. If you read the word groves in I think it's King Samuel, whatever, it relates to, and my first day at graduate school at the University of Chicago, I walked upstairs. I must have told this story a million times. I walked upstairs and there was this 7-foot penis with writing on it. It was made out of basalt and it was taken from the land of Mesopotamia, and it was here at the Oriental Institute, University of Chicago. I was this young kid. I was 19 years old, and there it was. And I had very little idea at that time of why they would draw a hammer, chisel out the top of the penis with words of praise to the god they were worshiping. Yeah, anyway, that's what Ashtaroth is. I can show it to you sometime. The anger of the Lord burned against Israel and gave them into the hands of the plunderers who plundered them and sold them into the hands of their enemies around them, and so that they could no longer stand before their enemies. Wherever they went, the hand of the Lord was against them for evil, as the Lord had spoken, and as the Lord had sworn read it, Bob, sworn to them, so that they were severely distressed. That's, I guess, putting it mildly. Oh, they didn't feel so good. They were severely distressed. I think the language in the Hebrew is worse than that, but that's not the point of that. And I gave you the references in the book of Judges. We won't go into anything past chapter 5. So the last two, chapter 10, 6, and 13:1. There's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places where they did evil in the sight of the Lord. Great moniker for what you were doing while you were in the area of Palestine. So what was God's answer? His solution was he raised up judges who delivered them from the hands of those who plundered them. We just read that. Yet they did not listen to their judges, for they played the harlot after other gods, bowed themselves down, blah, 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 blah. So where do we want to go into here? But verse 19, it came about when the judge died that they would turn back and act more corruptly. Oh, I missed it, that the judge delivered them. I think that's the word delivered is probably saved. So it's probably has something to do with Messiah. I can't remember if it's the word, the Hebrew form of Mishaik. Anyway, but after the judge died, they came and followed the gods again. Verse 20, so the anger of the Lord burned against them again, and because this nation has transgressed my covenant, which I commanded their fathers, and has not listened to my voice, I will no longer drive them out from before them, any of the nations which Joshua left when he died. I want you to see that Joshua also didn't do it during his lifetime, and he left these nations unconquered, unthrown, undestroyed, whereas God wanted them all. Kick them out. Anyway, but the reason he did it was to test them, whether they would keep the way of the Lord, to walk in it as their fathers did or not. That's the simplicity of it. You either keep the way of the Lord or God brings it down on your head, basically. So the Lord allowed those nations to remain, not driving them out quickly, okay? And he did not give them into the hand of Joshua. That's important. We're in the book of Judges here, and we're talking about Joshua again because he was kind of formidable. So here we are in 3:1, okay? I'm going to read a couple of places here. In the middle of 3:1, I think this is where, we have to read all this. The Perizzites, verse 5, all the ites are there, and they took their daughters, meaning Israel took their daughters for themselves as wives, and gave their own daughters to their sons and served their gods. Lovely people. Sons of Israel, here it is, did evil, right? Forgot the God. And so God sold them into the hands of Cushan-Rishaim, a king of Mesopotamia, and the sons of Israel served that dude 8 years. And when the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, he raised up the deliverer for the sons of Israel. There he is, the first one, Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's youngest brother. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, pretty typical, and he judged Israel. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. We've been taught, many of us, that the Christians get spirit in them. These dudes had spirit on them. And there were however many judges, 13 or so, maybe more. When he went out to war, the Lord gave Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia, into his hands, so that he prevailed over the dude. God, how many times do you want to say it? Then the land had rest 40 years. Lovely. Othniel died, and they did it again. And so the Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil. Okay, we're not going to read about Eglon. I'll quickly cover what Eglon was, but here's the other one that in chapter 4 we'll get into, did evil in the sight of the Lord. This is where Deborah steps in. I just wanted to give you the first two of the did evil in the sight of the Lord before we get into all about Deborah. This is just intro to the chapters about Deborah. She was a prophetess, and she was judging Israel at the time after, not only after Othniel, but after Ehud, chapter 4, verse 1. Sons of Israel again did evil in the sight after Ehud died, and the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. We'll get to that in a minute. In fact, well, let's just look. And the commander of the army was Sisera, and he lived in a different place than Hazor. I'm not even going to try to read that. It's too long. The sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, and Sisera, had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed the sons of Israel for 20 years. And then, or now, Deborah was a prophetess. And she used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah. It wasn't called Deborah at the time, but at the time of the writing, the dude who put this together said that the tree was the tree of Deborah because it had become famous by the time this was put together. She used to sit under the tree between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the sons of Israel came up to her for judgment. So let's look at this. Here's Ephraim in the middle of the map there. It's the light-colored yellow, just above Judah and Benjamin, to the right side of Dan and below Manasseh. And that's where she lived. That's where Deborah lived. Now, up at the top there, you'll see Naphtali and Zebulun. Well, that's where Hazor is. Here, Hazor is up there where the red arrow says it is. That's where the king Jabin lived. Now, that the two seas there, it's not the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. That's the Sea of Galilee and the little lake of Merom. So it's north of the Sea of Galilee in New Testament parlance. And the arrows there in the gray, we're not going to get into, but that's the whole activity of the time of Deborah. And when Deborah became, and so she's like way south of here when she became a judge, but the activity related to Jabin, king of Hazor, who was a Canaanite, okay? And I just wanted you to, here's another little, I put this together because I had to for myself. The first prophets in the Bible, and then some. The first prophet was named, okay, named. I'm sure there was others, but the ones named are, there's Abraham, Moses, Miriam, Balaam, and Deborah. So of the first, 5, 2 of them are women. I love it. So Genesis 27 says, therefore restore the man's wife, for he's a prophet. That's when Abraham went into king of, what the hell was the name of the place? Can't remember it. And told the king that Sarah was his sister. No, and this is a great little story if you want to read it. But that's where you first see that Abraham was a prophet. And then you know that, of course, Moses was a prophet. But how do you know that? Because Deuteronomy 34:10 says so. No prophet has arisen like Moses, okay? Then Miriam is flat out said Miriam was a prophetess. And then Balaam, strangely, you don't know Balaam is a prophet until you read 2 Peter 2:16. But he received a rebuke for his own transgression, for a mute donkey, speaking with the voice of a man, restrained the madness of the prophet. He was a prophet, folks. He actually, tagged along with Israel for a while until he really blew it and they killed him. And then, of course, Deborah, in the section we just read, Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lipidoth, which means something like lightning or something, was judging Israel. So she's a prophet and she's judging. And later in chapter 5 of Judges, verse 28, she's also shown she was a mother. It's an amazing woman. We'll get to that. So then there's the rest of all those prophets. There's Huldah, a woman, Noadiah, a woman, Isaiah's wife, a woman, Anna, a woman, and then all the rest of the guys. You know all the guys. I just wanted you to see all the women because there's lots of them. The angel of the Lord is God's representative. He can come down. God cannot quite come down yet. And why did I give you all this? This is like stuff. Stuff. Angel of the Lord, angel of God. Looking at the book of Judges, the term angel of the Lord, angel of God, is used in only 4 contexts. There they are. And there was about a 500-year period under that the judges were judging. And there's over 500 years, at least written-wise, you had 4 visitations by the angel of the Lord. It's a big deal. I'm working on another research night on the angel of the Lord. And you compare that with the records in the Torah, the first 5 books. There's 6 contexts from Abraham to Balaam, which is about 800 years, and there they are. These are the 6 places. Is it 6? What are these? 6 places where the angel of the Lord shows up, okay? And there's a reason for the angel of the Lord showing up, but that's not tonight. Tonight, we're going to deal with a quick review on Othniel, which we just did. I mean, that was all it is. Caleb's little brother took out Cushan Rishathaim, king of Mesopotamia. But as soon as he died, they went back into doing evil in the sight of the Lord. And then you had Ehud. Read the story. It's in chapter 3. I'm not going to read it. The story of fat King Eglon of Moab. It's almost like if your kids are like 10, 11, or 12, read that one to them. There's a sword involved and more, it's kind of gory stuff, but it's a great story about Ehud the judge killing King Eglon of Moab. And then Shamgar, not Shazam, but Shamgar, he's the next judge, and there's one verse about him. Judges 4. And here at the end of chapter 3, we start, before we get into 4, in Deborah, we see chapter 3, verse 31. After him, after Ehud, who was after Othniel, came Shamgar, the son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad, and he also saved Israel. So Shamgar has one verse. That's it, folks. Shamgar gets a verse about his judgeship. That's it. Actually, I guess there's one comment about him in chapter 5, which we'll get to. But Shamgar, the fast judge, you don't know too much about him unless you know about all the other judges and how they fit into the scheme of that 480-year period, which I gave you, by the way, in part 1. Chapter 4, then the sons of Israel did it again after Ehud died, okay? And the Lord sold them into the hand. So what do you know from this? Verse 1, that even 331, after Ehud, you had Shamgar, but Shamgar is not even mentioned here. So the only dude that is mentioned here in chapter 4, verse 1 is Ehud, so what you know from this is that Deborah and Shamgar were kind of co-judges. They were doing it at the same time. Maybe that's why he only got one verse and Deborah gets 2 full chapters. I don't know. Deborah was quite a woman. Then the sons of Israel did evil. Hope you followed that. After Ehud died, and the Lord sold him in the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. We saw that. It's north of the Sea of Galilee. So it's kind of on the outskirts of what we would consider Israel. And it was, because it was Canaan. And that's where Hazor was. And the commander of his army, Sisera, who lived, I know you saw it, but he lived south and west of that, over near the water, over near the Sea of Mediterranean Sea, some miles away. And this should give you the idea and understanding that Canaan wasn't just in one place. It was all over, and there were a multitude of kings in the area, which we'll get to. So verse 3, the sons of God cried. No, they cried to the Lord, for he had 900 iron chariots. Okay, the 900 chariots, iron ones, iron. We're in like, what are we in? 1100 BC. And some of you guys know, maybe Greg Payer knows when the Iron Age became a big deal. And then there was the Bronze Age where they could make weapons of metal versus weapons of stone or horn, you know. I think there's a word for the word horn that isn't horn, but we'll talk about that after. As you'll see in chapter 5, Jabin was over more than just a small territory. And by the way, since we're here, by way of introduction, Judges 4 is the equivalent of Judges 5. And Judges 4 is, in the Hebrew, it's prose. It's a story. It just gives you the facts, ma'am. But chapter 5 is poetry. It's a song. It's called the Song of Deborah, and it's a big deal. When we get there, that, I guess by way of introduction, whoever put this together, Judges, they stitched it together from various sources because the song is nothing like the narrative here. And you'll see it when we get to chapter 5. And chapter 4 of Judges is, shall we say, it's not like it's not spiritual, but it's from a physical standpoint. Whereas Judges chapter 5 is from a spiritual standpoint. That's chapter 5 is where you get the famous verse about the stars fighting for Sisera, or is it against Sisera? It's against Sisera. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. You don't have any of that here, but you have it in chapter 5 in the Song of Deborah, which, by the way, Deborah wrote. So we'll get there to the consternation of many, many scholars. You can't deny it. She wrote it. Now, chapter 4, verse 4. Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of the dude, was judging Israel at the time. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel and hill country of Ephraim, which was Ephraim is just north of Jerusalem. And now we're like, maybe 80 miles north of this to the site of Hazor, where Jabin lived. Sons of Israel came to her for judgment. They came to her. That's a big deal. Now she sent and summoned Barak. She was pretty powerful. The son of Abinoam from Kadesh Naphtali. It was Kadesh in Naphtali, the area of Naphtali, which was north, okay, which is way north, up near the Sea of Galilee, from down near close to the Dead Sea. Okay, and she said to him, "Look, the Lord." Literally, look, behold, that's the word look. The Lord, the God of it, it's so funny that we behold, it's a very spiritual word. No, it's just look, behold, look. It's like there's another way to look at this where I know if you read the Psalms and you read ascribe to the Lord, you know, it's basically it's the word give it up. Just give to the Lord. And so we get so sanctimonious in leaving it behold, but it is the word look. The Lord God of Israel has commanded, go and march to Mount Tabor and take with you, he's talking to Barak, not herself, take with you 10,000 from the sons of Naphtali and the sons of Zebulun, and I will draw out to you Syria, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his many troops to the river Kishon, and I will give him into your hands. Okay, so I don't have the map readily available, but the river Kishon is way south where Sisera lived. Like, I'm going to say 80 to 100 miles south of where Barak lived with Naphtali and Zebulun. And the reason Naphtali and Zebulun, the two tribes, were asked or told, go, march, told, was because in their area is where Hazor, the magical king of Hazor, Jabin, lived, but his army was way further south. So now, I say that it's unique about Deborah. It's because everybody came to her. She didn't go to them, as was with Samuel, which you'll read in a future, wild east. We'll get into Samuel and show that he actually made the rounds. He didn't have people come to him. He was a hiker. And we'll see in chapter 5 that she was a mother. I already told you that. Okay. Then Barak said to her, oh, another thing about Barak. People think he was a military commander. It says nothing about that anywhere at any time. It's kind of like Gideon, right? That lived among the sheepfold, I think it says. Barak was just a dude, okay? If she said to her, he said to her, if you go up with me, I trust you, then I'll go up. But if you do not go up, I do not go up. She said, I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the honor shall not be yours on the journey that you're about to take. She's already sealed it for him. She knows he's going to go. She knows he's a believer. He's just a scared believer, okay? For the Lord will sell Sisera into the hands of a woman, and it's not going to be Deborah, as you all know. Nothing about, here I said it, nothing about Barak's military prowess. So then, Deborah arose, went to Barak to Kadesh. Okay, that's far north because she had to go north. And then Barak called Zebulun and Naphtali together and went the 10,000 each, right? And Deborah also went up with him because you had to go up to find Sisera. Okay. Okay, now Heber, this is a brief aside, Heber the Kenite, who had separated from himself from the Kenites, from the sons of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak of Zaananim, which is near Kadesh. Okay, then they told Sisera that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor. Okay, nice guys, these Kenites, these friends of Moses, right? Sisera called together his chariots, the 900 dudes, right? And all the people who were with him from his place, which is down near the river Kishon, which is south and near Jerusalem, if you will, west of Jerusalem. And then Deborah said to Barak, okay, get up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Behold, the Lord has gone out before you. So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following, and the Lord routed Sisera and his chariots and his armies at the edge of the sword before Barak, just like God had told Deborah it would happen. Sisera alighted from his chariot and fled away on foot. Good story here. Barak pursued the chariots and the armies as far as Sisera's hometown, and all the army fell with the edge of the sword. Not even one was left. That's how God did it. That's how he wanted it done. So they did it here. Okay. Barak obeyed the word given to Moses, kill them all. Finally killed them all. Okay, so Sisera, however, had gotten down off his chariot and fled away by foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, one of the guys that had tricked, or at least told Sisera that Barak and Deborah were coming. And so he figures, he's got a safe place to go because they had told him. So, for there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera, said to him, turn aside, my master, turn aside, do not be afraid. He turned aside into the tent. And that's very emphatic in the Hebrew, the tent, okay? She covered him with a rug, and he said to her, please give me a little water to drink. I am so thirsty. So she opened a bottle of milk, gave him a drink, and then she covered him. He said to her, stand in the doorway of the tent, and it shall be if anyone comes and inquires of you and says, is there anyone here? You shall say no. But Jael, Heber's wife, took a tent peg, seized a hammer in her hand, and went secretly to him, drove the peg into his temple, and it went through to the ground, all the way through. And he was sound asleep and exhausted. And the next verse, and dead. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, we'll get into this in a second, Jael came out to meet him and said, come, I'll show you the man for whom you're looking. Is this a double cross? You're in your mind, you're going, what's going on here? He entered with her, and behold, Sisera was lying dead with the tent peg in his temple. So God subdued on that day Jabin the king before the sons of Israel, and the hands of the sons of Israel pressed heavier and heavier upon Jabin the king of Canaan until they had destroyed Jabin the king of Canaan. I've got to show you something here. I read it a couple days ago. I was going to try to share it in a different way. I want to just read it. It was a very well done section here. Judges 4, 17 and 18 teaches us some particulars of the salt covenant. So many of you guys know that the jail deal was the salt covenant when she gave him the milk, or as it says in one translation, curd, in another translation, cream cheese. Love it. There was a war between Sisera and Barak, and here we're shown the household of Heber and Jael are neutral, right? Jael, Mrs. Heber, went out to meet Sisera, who was on the run, and said, "Turn in, my Lord, turn into me." It was an invitation to come in, which he did, and she showed him into, and there it is, the tent, and covered him with a mantle. Such an invitation in those days meant that you would care for your guest, and you'd be expressing a covenant with them to feed them, protect them, and care for them 100%. Now that's called commitment, even to the point of laying down your life to see it fulfilled. Listen to this. The tent, this account is as a parable for us. Note that Jael invited Sisera into the tent. He had been running and was tired, needed rest. He knew the covenant of guests asked for water. Jael, however, gave him milk. It's not sweet milk as we have today, but more like buttermilk. This is cool. And it would have been salted and able to keep it in the hot weather. But serving him milk, she took out a covenant of salt with him. This lady would even lie. This happens. I can read you this in other places in the Hebrew scriptures where people lied to keep the covenant. This lady would even lie to protect him and keep the covenant of salt. But distrusting Sisera was still shaking and unbelieving. He knew about the covenant of salt. It was very much a part of their culture. He then proceeds to instruct her how to move in the said covenant, what to do. He said, stand at the door of the tent, and if any man comes, blah, 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 you just tell him I'm not here. He felt very insecure in this covenant, and he didn't trust her to keep the covenant. Men quite often cannot receive from a woman of God. He failed. That happens even today. He failed to believe Jael would protect him in every possible way. But wait, there's more. Now comes the shocking contrast to everything that's been said and done. Then Heber did the double deed through the temples in the middle there. Wait a minute, it looks like a double cross, which is what I said to you too as well. Behold, Barak has pursued Sisera. Jael came out and said, come, and I will show you the man whom you seek. And when he came to her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead. Now here's the key. The background of these people was nomadic. They lived in tents sectioned off with curtains. There was the main tent described here as the tent, the big one, there where the family and friends ate and visited. It could have been more than one room. In every Bedouin tent arrangement, there would have been separate tent rooms for the wife only. That was her tent, her private space, a place where she could be quiet. No one was allowed to violate the sanctity of her tent. Even her husband came in only when invited. So what had happened was the unbelieving Sisera had not only received the covenant or covering of a household, but he had also given the salt covenant via milk. All he had to do was stay at the resting point in the big tent, the three-ring tent, all cozy and covered up with a mantle, as it said. Knowing Jael would somehow skirted any embarrassing questions to protect him from Barak, he should have trusted in the covenant, but alas, he didn't. So when she wasn't looking, he slipped out of the tent and into her tent, where he knew he would be safe. How often we try to help God or the Lord keep his covenant that he has with us. He gets a little preachy here, but I didn't mind it. As soon as she saw that he had gone into her tent, she knew, of course, that he had broken the salt covenant, and she knew that the penalty of such was death. She went into him, fixed him right through his unbelieving mind. I love that. His weak thinking department nailed him to the ground. Literally, his thinking was of the earth, earthy, and received the due reward of which is death. For us, it's not physical death, but most certainly it would be spiritual death. Cut off from the effects of the great covenant that Jesus has provided, blah, 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 blah. I just wanted you to read that how the particulars of how Jael perceived the covenant, okay, and how Sisera had broken it, okay. I thought that was, and you can have that. I'll send it to you if you want. At least I'll put it in the download section of the my Dropbox when I put this teaching up. So now I want to get to chapter 5, and I know it's we're going pretty late here. Well, I think we can do it in a half hour. This chapter was composed by Deborah. It's the next chapter. It's difficult Hebrew, folks. I'll tell older words used only once. The oldest Hebrew I know of, and I read it again today, scholars across the board say this is the oldest retained section of the Hebrew Bible. It's poetic in nature versus chapter 4, which is prose, narrative. And I'm going to show you how poetic it was because I've done my own rendition of it as best I can with explanation. It was easier to remember in the days before scripture was written. So is poetry. What's a poetry? The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere or The Night Before Christmas. Those are poetic, right? It's easy to remember. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a rat. No, mouse. That's why it's in your head. Or the songs of the Beatles. She loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, they're poetry. It's framed by a couple of prose, and that's why this is called the Song of Deborah in all scholarly writings and within the poem itself. It's framed by a couple of prose verses before and after. And folks, I was blown away reviewing this for the umpteenth time in my life. I learned so much this week. And I've attempted to show these poetic stanzas with notes. Kind of writing is the difference between Kings and Samuel, too, and the books of the Chronicler. Chronicles is from God's perspective, and King Samuel is mostly, I say mostly, from man's perspective, not totally. You'll see Yahweh taught Deborah in this chapter about the background of the fight. You'll love this. You'll absolutely love. I get so excited because everybody knows the one verse. The stars fought against Sisera. Well, and we know that's angels because stars are angelic. But wait till you see how much more there is around those verses that you've never been taught because it's difficult. The only people that teach these kind of things, these records of the more ancient Hebrew texts, are the liberal scholars, and they're never looking for angelic stuff. Never. Anyway, just let me teach you. Then Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sang on that day, they did, but it's not really they. That the leaders led in Israel, that people volunteered, bless the Lord. Here's the poetry. Hear, O kings, give ear. O rulers, to the Lord, Deborah, will sing. I will sing praise to the Lord, the God of Israel. So that's verse 3. Note Deborah is speaking to kings, okay? But in chapter 4, there was how many kings? 1, Jabin, the king of Canaan. This, to the careful reader, should make your ears attuned to the spiritual nature of the chapter. I, to the Lord, Deborah, will sing. Listen, kings, you better give your ear. I'm talking to you, says Deborah. And if you're sharp, you know what king she's talking to. And if you're not, I'm going to tell you, they're the kings of the earth, those who are ruling angels that live in the heavens. It'll come back to you in spades in a minute. Lord, when you went out from Seir, that's south of the Dead Sea, when you marched from the field of Edom, generally those two phrases are exactly the same. What happened when you went out from Seir? I think the word is marched in the Hebrew, but you went out from Seir. And how did he do that? This was the Exodus that Deborah is referring to. When the children of Israel came out from Edom, which Edom didn't like them, they gave them a hell of a time, but when they marched, the earth quaked. What else is in Edom? Mount Sinai, right? The earth quaked, the heavens dripped, or dropped is better. The clouds dropped water. This, of course, remembering Mount Sinai, where God, came down onto the mountaintop with angels and lots of trumpets, fire and smoke and all kinds of stuff. There it is. The mountain quaked at the presence of the Lord. This Sinai, at the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. You see how I'm separating these phrases and trying to parallel them? Okay, verse 6, in the days of Shamgar. Here he gets another verse. The son of Anah, in the days of Jael. So you see why I said what I said. The last verse of chapter 3, verse 31, where Shamgar beat up a couple of Philistines with an ox goad. Here, it's the same time period as the days of Jael, which is the same time period as Deborah. So there were more than one judge at one time. So if you thought there was never two at once, there were. It happens elsewhere. So in the days of Shamgar, verse 6, the son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted, the travelers went about roundabout ways. I already said that. Okay, verse 7, the pleasant peasantry, the villagers ceased. They ceased in Israel. They were scared until I, Deborah, arose. Until I arose. A mother in Israel. And she was, in more than one sense, double entendre. Here's how she wrote it. She wrote it. She was a mother. It's scary. It was scary. No one felt safe in Israel, is basically what this verse is saying. Now, here we go. She says, new gods were chosen. Then war was in the gates. Better translation is they consorted with demons. New gods were chosen, paralleled with they consorted with demons. And I'll show you this in a second. And then the last part of the verse, not a shield or spear was seen among the 40,000 in Israel. Okay, the word gods in verse 8 is Elohim. They're not human leaders ever. They're gods, okay? You will never show me a verse in the Bible that says that Elohim are human leaders, ever. I'll turn it back every time and show you why. They're angelic. So who chose them? The leader of those gods. The word war is a hapax legomena in the Hebrew. So the way you get new gods were chosen and they consorted with demons is what they call repointing of the Hebrew text, where it says, then war was in the gates. Let me highlight here. When it says wars were in the gates here, the word gates is the word, here's the word gates. I'm highlighting it, okay? Sha'ir. And here's the word devils, Sha'ir. Okay? So somewhere along the line, they lost the little jot there. It is literally, it's a jot. It's a yod, a jot. So they lost a jot and devils became gates. And so the simplicity of it is that translation, new gods were chosen, they consorted with devils, is real. It's a real good translation. I was reading a section that was too complicated to put in this, but I agreed with it because it proved it to me. My heart goes out to the commanders of Israel. This is Deborah speaking. The volunteers among the people bless the Lord. The magnificence of this writing is that Deborah is showing the spiritual side of the battle, whereas chapter 4's author showed the physical. So she's saying, my heart goes out to the commanders of Israel. Verse 10, who ride on white donkeys, who sit in rich carpets, and you who travel on the road, sing at the sound of those who divide the flocks. And that's literally the word, those who shoot arrows among the watering places. There at the watering places, the river Kidron is my question, they shall recount the righteous deeds of Yahweh, the righteous deeds for his villagers in Israel. The people of the Lord went down to the gates, again, probably the devils, right? Rather than the Sha'ar, the gates, it's Sha'ir. And this is the context pushes hard that it's a spiritual activity. Now you got to understand that the word devils or demons, as some folks want to say it, is hardly ever used in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, excuse me. Obviously, it's used in the Gospels and Acts and all over, but in the Hebrew Bible, hardly ever. So that it shows up here was grating against the sensibilities of the scribes. So they changed it from Sha'ir, which is devils or demons, to Sha'ar, the gates, which actually makes no sense. Okay, you have to read the literature. Granted, this is hard Hebrew. But then here we go into the meat of the story. Wake up, Deborah. Awake and sing a song. Arise, Barak, take away your captives, O son of Abinoam. And here it is. And I crossed this next verse out from the NASB because what it says, then the survivors came down to the nobles. It's literally, and I've given the Hebrew here, the NIV is better. The remnant of the nobles came down. The people of the Lord came down to me against the mighty ones. This came down business should have alerted readers years ago. How did the people of the Lord come down? Well, everybody says, well, they came down from Mount Tabor. No. The people of the Lord are angelic, okay? They came down from heaven. They came down to me, Deborah. Wait a minute. How do we know that this is angels, Bob? Well, Deborah was already with the army in Mount Tabor. So they didn't come down to Deborah, from Mount Tabor. She was with them in Mount Tabor. That's why the people of the Lord and the people of the Lord, read Psalm 110, when Jesus comes back, his people shall volunteer in the day of his power, and they will come down. It's a thing, folks. Anyway, how did they come down to Deborah? They literally, as angelic beings, came down against the mighty ones. That's what, and then just to show you, the RSV also has it. Then down marched, I loved it, the remnant of the noble ones. The people of the Lord marched down, and it's to me is the text. Here it is, to me. Where is it up here? To me. Here's to me. That's Hebrew. To me. It's not for him. It's to me. And that's what the NIV had. That's what the RSV have. That's what all the versions have. They marched down to me against the mighty ones. So now I wanted to show you that the noble here, the noble ones, that these other dudes came down, the remnant of the noble ones came down. It's the word adir. And if you do an entire word study, there's about 30 uses, and I went through them all. And half of them, it's the word glorious, okay? Why they use the word noble, I don't know. Magnificent, majestic ones, mighty ones, nobles, they wanted to make it human. It's not a human. In all these references here, they're angelic, okay? So there's a reason for calling them angelic beings, these nobles who came down to Deborah, all right? I know this may be complicated for some of you, but listen up. This is celestial language, and you'll see it in verse 20 below. Nobles elsewhere in the Hebrew Bible refer to angelic beings or God. There's about 4 or 5 that are right to God, who's majestic, not noble. Deborah is the one singing for help here. She's singing for help, asking. She's the one who's writing the chapter. She'll love this. From Ephraim, those whose root is in Amalek came down. Now we're into this is actually the physical. From Ephraim, that's one of the tribes. Benjamin, another of the tribes. From Machir, commanders came down. From Zebulun, those who wield the staff. I suppose it could be angelic, those who were, protecting these tribes, but on the face of it, it looks like they're humans. The princes of Issachar might be these angelic beings. So she goes through a bunch of the princes of Issachar. We're with Deborah. And here's the deal. If you remember reading chapter 4, we only saw Zebulun and what was the other one? Naphtali. Here, guess who comes down? Somebody from Ephraim, somebody from Benjamin, here's the Zebulun. So their crew who wield the staff of office. That would be a good study to do. The princes of Issachar. These are princes, maybe they are angels, from these other tribes who didn't get called to the physical battle. But anyway, Israel's at stake here. Issachar. So as Issachar, so was Barak. Into the valley, ran the front road. Into the valley, rode the 500. Into the valley, they rushed at his heels, Barak's. Okay. Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great resolve of heart. Many other translations say, but Reuben, he was split into factions. Great were their heart searchings. Like, should we go down? Should we not go down? Should we go down? And you'll see what happens later. There was, some did, some didn't. Some of the physical people were called, even though in chapter 4, only Zebulun and Naphtali were called. That was pretty much, okay, we're going to war. Everybody of the 12 tribes is supposed to come. But we're seeing what happened here. Verse 16, why did you sit among the sheepfolds, Mr. Reuben, to hear the piping for the flocks? Among the divisions of Reuben, there's great searching of hearts. And I'm telling you, you know, you're idiots to stay with the sheepfold. Come down and help us. Gilead remained across the Jordan. Why did Dan stay in ships? Dan was over at the seashore, as was Asher. Asher sat at the seashore and remained by its landings. Zebulun was a people who despised their lives even to death, and Naphtali also in the high places in the field. They came down. The kings came forth and came and fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan. How many kings did chapter 4 show? One, and one commander, Sisera. So what are these kings here? They're the kings of Canaan. How many countries were in Canaan? Many. You name it. I can sometimes, maybe I should have listed them here. The Perizzites, the Hivites, the Hittites, the Jebusites, all these guys were kings of Canaan. They had their own rulers, physical and, yes, Virginia, spiritual. At Tanakh, near the waters of Megiddo, they took no plunder and silver. Here's my notes. They were not kings of the land. They were the kings of the more angelic natures. And we'll see that in the next verse. There was only one human king involved. Those of the Canaanites were many. They're not going to give up easily when they're fighting with nobles, with the majestic ones from heaven that came down to Deborah. Here it is. The one verse you guys all know, but now you're seeing so much more. The stars fought from heaven. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. These are good angels. I always thought they were bad ones. And now these are angelics who came down against the mighty ones in verse 13. They came to Deborah. They came down to Deborah against the mighty ones. We're not talking physical people because, anyway, I showed you, Deborah was already with the physical army and they went down. These guys came down to her. Okay, the torrent of Kishon swept them away. The ancient torrent, the torrent Kishon. Oh my soul, march on with strength. Get your celestial sea hat on here, folks. This is water business. The waters are not still. They're torrents, okay? Not placid. They're waters mentioned at all. Why? Because Deborah recognized that these were ancient waters and that they were doing business for Israel. Read Job 38 and talk about how God talks to the sea and other places where he talks directly to the celestial sea. And there are good portions of angelic beings that are in that sea, and there are bad ones, okay? This is the torrent Kishon swept them away. Who? The kings who fought. Here, we'll go back up. The kings who had came and fought, the kings of Canaan, were swept away. Okay, there was only one king in chapter 4, and he wasn't swept away. He was living in Hazor. Where was Kishon? You got to read this chapter with these notes. So the river, the torrent, the river of Kishon is way south of Hazor, where Jabin, the king of Canaan, lived. These kings are not Jabin. They are those kings of the nations of Canaan that were vying for the heart and soul of Israel. Okay, so yeah, I just said it here. They're angelic forces, many of the nations who were trying to keep Israel out of the land of promise. Then the horses' hoofs beat from the dashing of the valiant steeds, the valiant ones. The word steeds, I should have crossed it out. It's not in the text. It's valiant ones, not steeds. Curse, and now here we go. So that's the end of the battle, but there's more to this. I just had this much time to work through what I did. There's a lot more, because verse 23, we're getting to there's 9 verses, 8 verses. Curse Meraz, said the angel of the Lord. What the hell? How'd the angel of the Lord get here? Who asked him? Well, his folks are there. Why wouldn't he be there? Yes, why wouldn't he be there? He is there. Curse Meraz. What the hell does that mean, Bob? Well, utterly curse its inhabitants. Meraz means refuge. It's not known where it is, but people say it's north. Does that ring a bell? Curse Mirage. Curse those who stayed back, who took refuge. Refers to those who didn't come to the fight, and mostly likely angelic beings. Note, it was Yahweh who needed the help, right? Why the angel of the Lord is saying this is because his people are there, because the battle was entirely showing the nature of the war here was in heaven. The stars fought against Sisera in their courses. Okay? Yes, it was physical too. We saw that in chapter 4. But chapter 5 is so freaking spiritual, it just blew my doors off. Because they did not come to the help of the Lord. Oh, wait a minute, I thought they were helping Israel. Yeah, but this is the Lord's battle from heaven to the help of the Lord against the Gibor, the warriors. What Gibors are those? They're the kings that came and fought. Most blessed of women is Jael, wife of Heber the Kenite. Most blessed is she of women in the tent. He asked for water, she gave him milk. In a magnificent bowl, she brought him curds. The salt covenant, I showed you the PDF. She reached out her hand for the tent peg and her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera, smashed his head. I love it. Shattered and pierced his temple. Talk about a woman writing about the real thing. She smashed his head. Deborah wants Jael to get all she can get here because it was she that won the battle, basically, right? Between her feet he bowed, he fell, he lay. See the poetic? This is lovely. If I could read it out loud to you in Hebrew, which I could, it would be too marvelous for words. It's so sing-songy. Between her feet he bowed, he fell. Where he bowed, there he fell dead. It's really pretty cool. Out of the window she looked and lamented. Who? The mother of Sisera through the lattice. How the hell? Look at what Deborah is writing here, folks. Out of the window she looked and lamented. Was that in chapter 4? Who cared about the mother of Sisera who was back home, right? But the mother of Sisera, a woman, cared about Sisera, so Deborah wrote about it. Look what she wrote. Out of the window she looked and lamented. The mother of Sisera through the lattice, looking out into the garden. Why does his chariot delay in coming? Why do the hoofbeats of his chariots tarry? Well, because he got his head smashed, which she just wrote in a verse before. Her wise princesses, Sisera's mother's wise princesses, would answer her. Indeed, she repeats her words to herself. Are they not finding? Are they not dividing the spoil? Those my good boy Sisera, a maiden, 2 maidens for every warrior. To Sisera, a spoil of dyed work, embroidered. Oh, he's a king. He's going to be a king. He's going to have dyed work of double embroidery on the neck of the spoiler, my boy Sisera. Note the attitudes of the time. Maidens for the warriors. Even his mother knew about it. It was rape. Pretty awesome stuff in here. Thus let your enemies perish, O Lord, says Deborah, but let those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its might. And the land was undisturbed for 40 years. So that's the story of Deborah